All right. Well, I will thank you for joining us, Huascar. Um, and I will do our introduction here really fast that Humanities Kansas has um, given us. So welcome to the Newton Public Library Zoom space tonight. I'm Dan. I do the adult services at Newton Public Library, if you don't know who I am. And I'm here also with Sam of Newton Public Library, and Sam also works upstairs in the adult department. So you can find us behind the counter and the glass walls. You can come wave at us and tell us hi and ask us any questions you would like about the library. Tonight, we are pleased to have the Poet Laureate of Kansas, Huascar Medina, for his presentation, May Our Voices Ring True. Our program is brought to us by Humanities Kansas, an independent nonprofit spearheading a movement of ideas to empower the people of Kansas to strengthen their communities and our democracy. So we may all enjoy the program. Please take a moment to turn off your phones. Huascar is a poet, writer, and performer who lives artfully in Topeka. He currently works as a freelance copywriter and as the literary editor for 785 magazine, publishing stories that spotlight literature and artistic events in Northeast Kansas. His poems can be found in his collection, How to Hang the Moon, published by Spartan Press, and his fourth coming book, Un Mango Grows in Kansas, will be released in 2020. Please welcome our guest tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Humanities Kansas. Thank you, Newton Public Library, Dan and Sam. It's been good corresponding with you guys and putting this together. It's a good way to close National Poetry Month. I'll be reading work mostly from Un Mango Grows in Kansas now. It did finally come out. Those were coming for a very long time in 2020. And I'm glad it's here, and I'm ready for my next collection of work. Un Mango Grows in Kansas is a collection of work which deals specifically with my time in Kansas, dealing with identity and location, and trying to blur those lines of where I belong, where I am, and where I could be, and how I feel about being here. The first poem I'll read in the book is entitled Arriving in Kansas. In this particular poem I wrote when I first moved to Kansas, and I moved to Kansas in 2001. I came from San Antonio, Texas, where I graduated from high school. I rode a Greyhound bus for, I think it was 22 hours. I like to say like 20, just say 24 at that point, right? Because you probably nap for too long the way. And it's a way that most people travel who don't have, a lot of money. It's a very frugal way to travel. And I traveled alone. And I've rode Greyhound buses most of my childhood. To be quite honest with you, I moved around a lot. My father was in the military. My parents were divorced when I grew up, and my aunt raised me after the age of 13. So I traveled from city to city visiting family, and I've done that at an early age. So the bus routes I know well, and the main stops. And interesting part about that story is I arrived in Topeka, and I thought I was here. I made it to Kansas, and my mother picks me up, and she's like, "Oh, we gotta drive to Holton." I was like, "Man, we still gotta go. That drive was longer than the entire bus ride. I promise you." So this first poem is entitled "Arriving in Kansas." It's in three parts. I hear the melodies of meadowlarks and the hinges of a swinging doors that lead to tall gray steps climbed in stages for the window seat, the only chair without the safety belt. Charcoal black turns clockwise, tugging towards anything other than before, full of freedom sense as progress, wish for forward motion, romanticized in our devotion to time, submission to time, religion of time, our pocket dictators, tapping through glass, fearful of time elapsed, infinite ellipses. It wasn't dusk or sky emanating through cracked glass in the Greyhound bus that awakened me, not the hum of rubber to asphalt, the soft new wheels and ecstasy, the heat of friction. There's a river god on wheels. He presses the gas pedal, taking me to new types of prison. Two, was always the little thing, chirping from a single circling Dorman 611-303 Lugnuts, natural steel, that whistles when we break, His mechanic was too busy to tighten up or too distracted by the world to care enough about the safety of those who travel together, and I have always traveled alone. On buses, in taxis, trains, and planes, my ticket pocket placed in a blazer, the kind we are expected to wear at our waist, constant reminder that the only destination worth traveling to is in ourselves, and no one can come with us in the end. Life's the longest, said West goodbye. Dying a ceremony we are forced to pay for, whether gone or long gone, and along the way to the last stop, the off ramps truly become one ways, no turnarounds, no detours, all stop and blacktops, too macabre to acknowledge daily our journey exiting. Three, the sound of braking. I pull a ticket stub from my pocket, glance at my watch. We were never on time. I read my receipt, itinerary, city, arrival, layover, departure. Something that really caught my attention about campus is how open space was. I was used to being surrounded by like concrete edifices, these huge buildings of glass. The city moved at a different pace than it does in Kansas. And Holton is a wonderful small town with a beautiful little tiny library that I visited regularly when I moved there. I didn't have a car, so I'd walk on the cobblestone streets and go sit at the library, reading and requesting books they didn't have sometimes. And I think the best request I ever made there was for an audio recording on tape of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. I wonder if it's still there. The next one I'm going to share is from one of my favorite poets, Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda is a poet, politician, diplomat, individual, and his work has always been, um, for the people, about the people. And he made ordinary things extraordinary and kind of elevated everyday life and gave individuals who are living what some would consider a simple or plain life um, a bit more dignity. And I've always appreciated him for doing that. And it's something that I like to keep in mind when I'm writing my work about my life. I wrote a poem for him. It's entitled Spanish Knotted Feather Stitching. Only Neruda can save us. I've written him pleas for guidance, addressed it to the waning crystal moon that red branches the now gone autumn in his window, the finch, the threads to palomas. He refused to wear the satchels my abuelita knitted through manos anudado before her passing. Palomas argued for practicality, balancing against my need for sentimentality. Added weight of things makes quite onerous, they say. How I wish these birds were more passenger pigeons, less of, willing to fight through wind and rain to get there, okay with war and loss. I've even taught them to fly in cursive in case they didn't make it, so others may see the phrases passing by before they're shot down. But very few people see the need for soft, round words free and flowing in the air, the grace appearing indecisive, almost lost in below. How they've pitied them, poor palomas. I beg of you, please take these notes to the shores. Sing towards the stillness view. Be candid, have manners. Wipe the sand from your feet before entering. Bathe in his cafe. Perch yourself upon his fingerpiece. I just have to know. The song of despair come before a love poem. Being first generation living in the United States, my family is a very interesting experience. I am not Spanish enough. I'm not American enough for some. And that's an interesting place to be in that gray area, that in between, to not really feel a sense of belonging to any particular group of people. And that first group that immigrates, that moves here, has that experience of trying to hold on to your culture, but also to try to assimilate, which is what an asked of us when we moved here. And my father is Puerto Rican. He's from Yabucoa, which is a mountainous region in central part of Puerto Rico, and it's high up in the mountains. You can see both coastlines. You can see the sunrise and set. I mean, the island's only 90 by 35, so it's a beautiful, magical place for me. His father and his father's father all worked the land. They were raising plantains, green bananas, yellow bananas. We had mango trees out there. They're descendants of slaves who were brought over to work the land to cut sugar cane. My mother's from Panama. She's from Chiriquí, Panama. She received her citizenship in 2009. Though she was married to my father, she never she never got her citizenship. And we decided in 2009 it was about time to make that happen. And it was an exciting time. It was really hard to do. That test is, I don't know if I passed that test, to be quite honest with you. That's just And he's from Tierra Alta, which is a mountainous region in Panama. It's off a volcano. They actually live on a dormant volcano where the family's from in Panama. So both of my parents are, the first to come to the United States. My father's from the island of Puerto Rico, so they would say he decided to go to the mainland. And I thought about this a lot because we speak Spanish, but we've decided to forget Spanish. When we got here, we had to speak English. We had to learn English. We had to learn English well. We had to learn English quickly. And I did as well as I could. And Spanish, we didn't speak a lot in the house. So there's, for some of us who come over, it's not being able to speak it fluently when you go visit. And I've had that experience a lot going back to Puerto Rico, where I was always referred to as the Americano, you know. So I say that because the next one I'm going to share is called Por favor, which is please. And some of the language in it is in Taíno, which is the indigenous language from Puerto Rico, it's a tribe that lived there. And that tribe lived in Puerto Rico and the neighboring Caribbean islands as well. The majority of the Taínos no longer exist once the Spaniards came in. So I feel very disconnected from those ancestors, from that spiritual growth that I could have received from them. I think part of it is because not only do I struggle speaking Spanish, I also struggle. I don't speak Taíno, so I can't connect with my spiritual mothers and fathers from that culture. In the beginning of my book, I open it with a couple of lines that goes, "To my parents, you came a long way to bring me here. We are so far away from your homes. I hope our ancestors remember me." So that's something I think about, and I wrote this poem about what it's like to come from a culture that's been colonized, and some of the language isn't Taino. Toa, toa, mother, madre, atabe, please come home. Take me to the beach sands infinite, blanketing us with abandoned time. These men are monsters, they are not gods. Why do you hide? Toa, toa, mother, madre, atabe, please come home. I'll perish if I leave. French frogs are crying, Sophie, Sophie. I will not stay without you. Just not been home. These men are monsters, they are not gods. Please don't leave us all behind. Toa, toa, mother, madre, atabe, please come home. These men are monsters, they are not gods. Save me from you, from us. Atabe is the creator of all things and culture. And in their mythology, all the mothers were taken away from their children on the island, and if they cried, they would be turned into frogs. And that myth has turned into the myth of the coqui on the island, which is a Puerto Rican myth of small frogs on the island. That is, that frog leaves the island of Puerto Rico, they'll perish. They can't survive anywhere else. And it's this kind of indoctrination that leaving Puerto Rico, you're not going to be successful because you're like the coqui. So there's that symbolism in there that exists. The next one I'm going to share is the Isla, which is my island. There's some words in here that are in Spanish that I want to make sure that we understand. But I don't want too much of the language to separate us. It's okay sometimes, but I think other times it's necessary to have an understanding, to have shared language. One word is El Yunque, which is the rainforest in Puerto Rico. Another word, another phrase is un brindis por ti, papa, which is toast for you, papa. Cookies are the products I spoke of earlier. De parranda, that's to go Christmas caroling. It's our equivalent of that in Puerto Rico. The most important word is jibaros. Jibaros are peasant farmers in Puerto Rico. My father's father was a peasant farmer. You know, my father's the first in his family not to be to join the military was his way out of poverty. It's an opportunity that he gave to me. I mean, when I was drill sergeant in the army. Farmers get negative connotations sometimes for being simple and uneducated. And I believe that exists not only in Puerto Rico. I sense that here also when I moved here. I felt that in Texas as well. And I was like, oh, there's yellows everywhere. You know, they get treated the same way everywhere. So this poem is entitled Mi. I ate a mango today. It was mostly green with reds and yellows. El yunque at dawn is mostly green and yellow.
Okay,
My homeland's enchanted, full of shady jungle mountains, frosting naked beaches, slowly making the ocean. There, sea breezes with the palm trees and peeping coconut stains, holding on too long and stand asleep, daydreaming of me. Night, and bring these for thee, Papa. Let us pretend it's cricket, a drunken coquille, the parranda, struggling with loss, singing in the wrong key, playing out of tune, unable to find their way home. Let us pretend we are surrounded by vacation, not work, that all this wheat is beach, that the above blue is ocean. Let us pretend you're watching me, vibe at a hammock's womb, strung to horizons with no ocean, no deep sand near, nor fear that I've become landlocked here, surrounded by jibaros who don't like jibaros, still an island. Puerto Rico has become this kind of imaginary place for my family. You know, we don't get to visit that often. I went to school there when I was younger after I left my mother's house for a very short while for a semester. It didn't go very well for me over there. I didn't feel very well. And my father was, I went to public school, but my father was teaching at a military academy out there, which was, I'm glad, and that probably would have been the worst situation to go. But my father is a teacher. Um, but my sister wanted to go back, and she was like, "Well, you know, when do I go?" And she asked the weirdest question. She was like, "You know, when is mango season in Puerto Rico?" And I asked her, "Where did you get that question from?" And she said, "TripAdvisor." And I was like, "What is TripAdvisor?" We went down this rabbit hole about TripAdvisor, and the responses to that question were incredible to me. One, there's this island, Vieques, which is really small off the coast of Puerto Rico. The U.S. military used to use part of this island to test their military weapons, and people still live there to this day. People still live there. I know people from the island of Vieques. I think it's incredible. But the island of Vieques apparently has the TripAdvisor. And they responded to this question of when it's mango season in Puerto Rico, and it made me write this poem. So, you know, without further ado on this one, when is mango season in Puerto Rico? TripAdvisor question from Jack. Somewhere in Vieques, there's always a tree with fruit. You just need local knowledge. May 9, 2008, response number 3 of 11, in the island of Vieques. I've yet to see a mango tree in Kansas. I buy my fruit at a Whole Food store. Most things here are from elsewhere. Even my jam travels into town. You know they grow a type of heaven in an orchard in a place called Santa Cruz. Mango spread, non-GMO, organic, 40 calories per tablespoon. It smells fleshy, like roadside mangoes, dropped from a tree, too ripe to grow, too old to save. There was a summer in Yabacoa with the street side parking lots and driveways where haze and mangoes. We ate mango flavored everything that summer. The taste of mangoes make your eyes close. I ate my first gusano that July. I didn't mind. I never saw it. It was still bliss. Fruit flies are angels born in their own kinds of heaven. Gusanos are worms. You can't taste them in the mangoes. But one of the years I was there, the mango trees are so heavy that the branches were starting to touch the ground, the pavement. It was just a great year for mangoes, and we ate mangoes all the time. They were just available, and I think home should be a place like that where sustenance is easily gathered. It's something that you don't have to put so much labor into. The land is providing for you naturally. I think that's a welcoming space. I think that feels like home. So when I see mangoes in the store, I always wonder where they're from. You know? The same thing with avocados. The next piece I'm going to share is called La Humedad, which means the humidity. It's a poem I wrote for a friend of mine. He's a DACA recipient, and his life is very different than mine. And the difference is what country he came from, right? And that's always been difficult for me to try to make sense of. And when he would be really stressed out, we'll go to the Chesterfield, which is a chocolate club, a Latin nightclub in Kansas City. It's also a movie theater, but one night a week you have to go in there, get dressed up, and listen to different types of Latin music. And it's one of the few spaces where I could return to that reminded me of like San Antonio, like the city. Everyone was speaking Spanish around me. Everyone, was dressed and had on too much cologne and perfume. It was just, and I love that experience. I love going there, and I love being able to forget where I was at. That's a place where we can go escape for a little bit from the pressures of our lives, and very specifically for him, um, you know, um, being a doctor assistant, being a dreamer. La Humedad. At 1400 Main Street, I asked for una Cuba libre, in yellow, un Puerto Rico rico, otro Nuevo México, otro Venezuela, paz en Guatemala, paz en Panamá y un Salvador para El Salvador, y algo diferente para Argentina. In the Chesterfield, I dance con música alegre, merengue, bachata y salsa. Ah, bailamos the rhythm, the son clave, en la humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad. Because sitting, wishing, and waiting would be hopeless in the climates we can't breathe in esta humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad, en esta humedad. El clima puede afectar su dolor, but I won't suffer silently. Tears be down my brow, eyes come out in song, and worry turns and fits a free protest in dance with hand in hand. La humedad, en esta 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 humedad. I miss going salsa dancing as soon as things open up more. That's like one of the first things you do is go dance. I'm gonna put on something a little too starched up and creased, and put on a little too much cologne, and that's something to happen. The next poem is probably the poem that I'm most proud of in this collection. It's a poem that really deals with language, understanding the power of language, the power of words, and how we use words. The poem is entitled New American. It's a poem that's been anthologized a couple of times so far and well received. It's a poem that really deals with trying to find a word other than immigrant to describe my experience and the experience of those around me who come here first, second, or even third generation in our country. The word immigrant has been villainized, has been used politically for advantages or to great disadvantages in certain groups. And I don't want that word anymore. It doesn't serve me right now. Until the word becomes more positive, I decided you're just going to call me New American. That's where we're at. So this poem is entitled New American. Don't call me immigrant. I'm the New American, striving in New America as a New American. I'm not your invader, not an animal, no criminal. I'm a just person, just striving in a New America. In New America, I'm a full-time student, overtime worker, volunteering in my free time. If I plan enough ahead for free time, I can even afford the free time. My free time is approved. I work hard in New America. Third shift warehouse, second shift my house, always on call, no days off, freelance for life, 4 jobs a week, blue and white collar. Don't call me immigrant. I'm the new American, surviving in New America as a new American. I'm not your invader, not an animal or criminal. I'm a just person, just surviving in a new America. This is New America. Student loans for all, high rent, higher utilities, low pay, rising healthcare costs, the cost of living deadly, no living wage, living in rage, my cousins in cage for wanting to live in a safer part of New America. Don't call me immigrant. I am the new American, living in New America as a new American. I'm not your invader, not an animal, no criminal. I'm a just person, just living in a new America, strong and proud, able to withstand the distance I've traveled, the distance from my family, the distance between us, the distance of our dialects, the distance in our churches, the distance in our homes, the distance between my ancestors and my grandchildren, the distance from the streets to the dorm rooms, the distance from the field to the corner of the street. Don't call me immigrant. I am the new American, dreaming of new America as a new American. I am not your invader, not an animal or criminal. I'm a just person, just dreaming of a new America. Old America. Don't be afraid. We are all America, North America, Central America, South America. We are all Americans. We all strive in Americas. We all survive in Americas. We all live in Americas. They are all the same America. We all dream of a greater America. I want you to be paid a living wage, live in affordable housing without college debt or medical debt or credit card debt or national debt. I want no more racism. But speaking for New America, I'm part of New America, whether you like it or not. So join me, please. Always got to sit a little bit after that one. You know, that one always feels like a plea for change. You know, some people say, you know, poetry is a prayer. I think we're going to switch it up a little bit and share a love poem. I wish I had more time to write more love poems, but now's not the time for love poems. Even though I think love is what's getting us through everything that's happening right now in our lives. The people around us who love us are the ones that protect. We're called speaking in tongues. I will hold private revivals. I will pray to anything holy for you. Whenever you walk in with all that salvation awaiting you, I swear to never hush the hallelujahs whispering in my soul. Oh Lord, I speak in silent tongues within her mouth as she listens, inhaling gospel after gospel, damning every bit of sin, washing away the guilt we once felt for creating heaven in a land where no one is missing. I just wanted to taste the Yahweh in your mouth, feel the warm forgiveness in your breath, baptize our unborn smiles, turn our lips into Quakers. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. God understand. I had a friend tell me that that poem was blasphemous. I was like, I don't understand how love can be. Speaking of love, two of my friends got married. And it made me write a poem called Commitment for Commitment. On that day, our left and right palms equaled. Our religion was born, and God watched as a congregation of two spoke the Psalms never read before. To still be able to write love poems in incredibly tumultuous times, I think it's a sign of us holding on to things that save us, that protect us. I think it's where our humanity lies and how we feel for others. And love is, I think, the deepest thing that this poem is a love poem entitled Ample. If the moon shattered and fell out the sky, I would gather its shards, build a mosaic of night, we may sleep and dream and sleep. The sun were to cool, would dance a blaze in the dervish outside your window, and the birds would chirp the light of morning, waking you with love songs. If the sea disappeared, I'd lay mirrors on an ocean bed near the coastline so you could see the blue depths of my devotion and pick it up like sea glass whenever you choose. And if the wind were to stop, I'd whisper in your ear each day to remind you air can still move you. I always have a selection of poetry that I think I have to read, but then, the day goes as the day should. The pandemic was one of the most difficult times of my life. I think most people's lives. And I have a couple poems that touched on this because I was still writing this as things were happening. Up to publication, I was still adding work and removing work from this collection, which is from Spartan Press. And it's in English and Spanish, and it's translated by Julie A. Sellers. And she teaches at Benedictine College. And it's interesting is everyone assumes that I wrote it in Spanish and she translated it to English. But I wrote it in English and Spanish, and she translated it all to Spanish and ensured that my translations were correct and that my grammar was correct. Because my level of Spanish, is conversational and it's not always grammatically correct in writing. And I wanted to ensure that I could communicate the best way possible in the work. And it's not something I'm ashamed of. With that being said, I did write about the pandemic a little bit. Two little pieces. One was Off the Stage, where I was really concerned with my mother, who's a frontline worker. She's a nurse. Like I was saying earlier, she's Panamanian. She's this short, powerful, fiery woman, put 4 kids through college, just did it on her own single mother life. And she's always going to be my hero. But this experience kind of elevated, her heroics for me. But it also elevated my fear. My mother and I both have severe asthma, and if she were to get sick, to catch COVID, I truly believe that it'd be it'd be the last time she got sick. I've seen her and me struggle with pneumonia in the past, so it was this constant state of anxiety and fear that we were living in, and she still went to work every day, and regardless of what she had available, she still did her job. When she got her COVID vaccine, my stress level went from outside of the screen to like just in the screen. And I got mine just recently, and I worked this entire time. I have a day job. My day job is I work maintenance for a hotel chain, and I still traveled. I still had people coming into town, staying at our hotels from different places that didn't have the same restrictions that we did. So this entire time, I was like, man, I need to get these shots, and it finally happened. Like this past month, like I got my shot this past Tuesday, my second one, and I'm feeling a lot better. I'm feeling a lot more jovial. I'm better about life. Here's the poem, and it starts with a quote from Brooke Bob from Vogue magazine, from an online article about staging. And this poem's entitled "Hot Stage." Once you're ready to light your stage, grab the stage, as far from the end you are burning as possible. I will always say sweet and silly things to you like, you are more charming in a room full of hummingbirds. I don't go to church, but know you are everything sacred to Genesis. You turn each day to Sunday. We've met once, a long time ago, before the sun and moon were interrupted by the earth. I remember you. I was a freshman. You were a slant of reflected light poured onto a wall which folded into a popcorn ceiling. Reflection. My burned CD covered in colored Sharpie titled Love Songs Volume 1. In the future will come a night when you'll sneak to our bedroom, burn the sage from our garden. I'll be sleeping away the passing of my mother, singing in memoration. The dust swallow her ashes. One day, I too will be gone, and the howling of morning will trap the wind inside you. Birdie will notice and ask if she may smudge. You say yes, to keep the window shut for a few more days, so you and I can take our time. Proper Midwest goodbye. I tell my partner if we have another child, and she's like, "Well, what are we gonna name her?" I was like, I don't know, but I'm gonna call her Birdie." That's where we're at with that. So I do have a son. My son is 9 years old. His name is Jackson. He's Puerto Rican, Panamanian, Caucasian, and Vietnamese, and he's a beautiful, powerful little wannabe man right now. He thinks he knows it all. We had great discussions about what we both don't really know. That leads me to a poem um, about this news story I heard about this individual who saved the lives of some kids in Kansas City. KCTV News, the Bob Mill. Greater love hath no man than this, the man lay down his life for his friend. On 1513 James. An American hero died today. Never met this man. He died on February 18, 2020. Mr. Bob was a crossing guard employed at Wyandotte Army. At 8 a.m. near 54th Street, 11 West Parish School was hit by a black sedan. 88-year-old Bob Mill was struck while pushing two little boys, ages 11 and 7, out of the way of an approaching vehicle. His son, I want my son to have a different experience than I've had living here in the States. I wanted to, so more welcomes if that's possible, that he has more opportunities. You know, I think every time a generation has a child, we want them to do better than we did. I think everyone's dream at the end of the day that if they don't have to work as hard as we do. But for my son, I wanted to be able to feel free, more free than I did. And I wrote this poem about it. And it's called Hijo, which means son. Hijo, your emotions are not a red flag. Your tiredness and sadness are not a threat. Your smile does not have to intercept stares from other men walking, their lives quelling their insecurity. Your honesty will be a burden to liars. It's not your fault. You're allowed to be beautiful without the label of lecherous. You can be soft without being weak. Be weak. You can be powerful and still be kind. Forgive. Don't. You can be at peace, not a mystery. You can put down your guard. You can be vulnerable, laugh, or cry, or both. You can speak before spoken to. You do not have to say a word. Be silent. Take up space if you want to. You don't. Your silence is not invasion. Your voice is not aggression. You can sing and dance whenever, wherever. Use love if you want to. Don't. You are just you, being you, magnificent you, precious. I ask that you never ask for permission to be beautiful. You were born the right to all of your uniqueness. I'm gonna read probably two more poems, and then I think we can just open up to some conversation. And that's always my favorite part of this experience of reading some poems that come across as really vulnerable for me. The questions can get interesting. This poem's entitled Promises of Promesa, written in English and Spanish. Um, the first line is Llanero, Llanero, which means any minute now, plainsman. And that line is repeated throughout the poem. Promesa. Llanero, Llanero. Won't always be this hard.
Yes.
Llanero, Llanero. They will embrace us. Llanero, Llanero. They will not fear us. Llanero, Llanero. They will accept us. Llanero, Llanero. They will respect us. Llanero, Llanero. They will not fight us. Llanero, Llanero. They will not attack us. Llanero, Llanero. They will not encage us. Llanero, Llanero. We will not be separated. Llanero, Llanero. They will not divide us. Llanero, Llanero. They will not send us back to die. Llanero, Llaneros. We will be welcomed. Llaneros, Llaneros. We will live in peace. Llanero, Llaneros. They will see us as equals. Llanero, Llaneros. We will be appreciated. Llanero, Llaneros. They will call us family. Llanero, Llaneros. They will love us. Llanero, Llaneros. They will not hate us. Llanero, Llaneros. We'll all be over soon. Llanero, Llaneros. We will forgive each other. I think this is I'll read two more. Let's do it that way. They're short. Per Asper ad Astra, a poem. When I first knew I was poet laureate, I couldn't tell anyone, which was really weird because I was at Hispanic on the Hill. I want to have a big celebration. Yeah, poet laureate. It's a great honor to be poet laureate of the state of Kansas. I'm the seventh poet laureate of the state of Kansas. And I like to say that I'm the first virtual poet laureate of Kansas as well. So I got that going for me, right? The next one I'm going to read is Per Astra ad Astra, and it's a poem that's also been anthologized quite a bit, and it's also been read at high school graduations, which I think is a humbling thing to hear, that my words could have that type of open. Per Astra ad Astra. We were lost in the plain, beautiful and ordinary, sunflowers in the field, seeds of fallen stars, standing tall, deeply rooted in this land. I've admired how our flowers shine, grasping towards the sky, beyond the prairie grass, anchored down to earth, mimicking the sun. When the gardener plants the seeds of helianthus, they are performing magic, raising stars out of the dust, where buzzing planets circle, half red moons set, and foaming comets float in orange comas. I've always felt that, late at night, in the bed of a truck, in the Kansas Guild, we were, center, universe. And I was exactly where I should be, amongst the flowers, not below. The last one I'm going to read is One Mango Grows in Kansas, which is the title of the book. You have found me, hidden in a wheat field, within husk form, growing for you. I am ready. Pick me. Hold me in your hand. Remove my skin. Peel away my color. Find that I am tender, soft, and sweet. Eat of me. Till there is nothing. Your mouths are empty, and your belly filled. What is left will live as seed to grow again, brighter, ardent, and less bitter. Thank you to everyone who decided to tune in today and get some poetry. Dan and Sam. That was a wonderful experience. I appreciate y'all a lot. Thank you, Newton Public Library, and thank you, United States.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate your poems, and some of them are, well, they're very powerful. And I like what you said about how a poem can kind of be like a prayer or a cry for justice, and yeah, that what was that last line of the last poem that you just read? The last couple of lines, maybe. I didn't think I quite caught it.
Give me a second. I'll get it for you. The last answer is what is left will live as seeds grow in brighter, hardened, and less bitter. At first, I was upset that I came to camp. So there's that full arriving here and then finally just accepting that I'm here and then I'm me. Like the layers to being guarded and allow myself to be seen as I am.
Oh, cool. Well, everybody, this started as a Zoom webinar, but I thought, there's 12 of us here, so I just promoted you all to panelists, which basically turns it into a standard Zoom meeting. So if you want to talk with, I meant to ask you beforehand. Is it Huascar or Huascar?
Huascar.
Huascar. Okay. Yeah. So if you guys have got questions for Huascar or just want to chat, you can turn on your mic, turn on your video if you want to, or you can type into the chat if you're more comfortable that way, whichever means. But I'm just kind of wondering, yes, Cynthia says, thank you, Poet Medina. I like that, the title, Poet Medina.
That's nice. Yeah.
Use it as a title like that. I'm kind of curious, how is it up in Tip? I feel like every little Kansas town has kind of like turned into its own island. So do you feel that way? And like I just wonder what the pandemic has been like in Topeka and if it's totally different from what it's been like in Newton,
Yeah, it's I believe it has been. I believe the more densely populated areas that have more traffic traveling through them. Because we're directly off of 470. 470, I mean, St. Louis to it's the I-70 corridor, like all the way to Colorado. So the traffic traveling through, where we're at is it's a lot. There's a lot of moving bodies, a lot of opportunity to transfer things. I'm in Topeka, but I work in Topeka. I live in Lawrence, so I get a sense of both. Both communities have handled it well, well as expected, I believe, in my opinion. I don't want to get too much into what is fact, what is net, but we're able to build community online through this. I was able to attend poetry events in other states. Something that I normally wouldn't do. Like I think all of us know how to use Zoom now, right? Like we've been doing this for a while, so we had this. If you guys wanted to tomorrow, you could be listening to a poetry reading in San Francisco or Oregon, or New York. We have that access now, and everyone had to make that happen to make their readings accessible. Their open mics became open Zoom mics. Their readings became Zoom readings, and yes, things were still pretty insular, but there was also this layer of connectedness that was created electronically, and I think that's important to utilize moving forward, like our ability to network with individuals in other cities and other towns and have conversations and share art and share music and that accessibility we got from the pandemic for that. That art is now more accessible, being transferred digitally. I think that's something to keep in mind that's occurring now. I mean, if you think about NFTs as well, like the digital, forms of art are being taken a lot more serious now. I think that involves readings as well and music performance.
So when did you start writing poetry? How old were you when you started expressing yourself in poetry?
Joan, is that correct? Joan?
Right. Mhm.
I started writing poetry. I would call it poetry at 11. I mean, what I was writing before then was not poetry. But I honestly, that's being harsh because I believe anyone who's writing from a sincere place, someone who's writing their truth, they're writing poetry. I think all truth is poetry, but all truth isn't beautiful. You know, uh, and so at 11, and it was because I traveled a lot, so I never made really deep connections. Poetry was always there. Poetry was available. I made friends with poets. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I,
I have
Do you have a
my
question?
hand.
Oh, go ahead, Barbara.
I was going to say, Joan, who just asked you questions, does some poetry as well. One of the things that's nice about this being a Zoom meeting is I've been landlocked for a year, and you bring the world to people who don't travel. You expose them to what life is like for those who don't travel. And there's so many people, friends of mine, who travel hasn't been one of their experiences. So to meet other cultures, to hear other possibilities, to be able to eat mangoes off a tree. I mean, the other nice thing about Zoom is I was paying attention really, but I also went on Amazon and bought a couple of your books. So I would say that Zoom and Amazon really respond to impulse purchases. So I want to thank you. Look forward to reading more.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for supporting and being interested in the work and investigating it more. I hope you enjoy it. My first collection is How to Hang the Moon, and that was about finding
Yeah.
reverence in ordinary and everyday things. So it's more of a collection of romantic poetry. So yeah,
Okay.
I like that one. It's different from Womango, I promise you. And the next one will be different. We're always finding new things to catch our attention or things we want to express. And Zoom has done that. Zoom has connected me to other places, other people, family members I can't see. I didn't get to see my mom for a while, and we just, we FaceTime. Hey, how you doing? Where you at? What's going on?
Oh, I would say also Newton is a population about 19,000, and it is on the same Santa Fe rail as Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe. So when I was in Topeka, I was able to catch the train and go to Dodge City. We're a railroad town.
When I went to Dodge City, that was my first Port Laureate event. It was in Dodge City. It was International Festival. The first one. It was in 2019, September 15th. I remember because I was like, oh, I can make that drive and drive back the same night. I did it, but I didn't do it. If that makes any sense. That was a very long drive. But I didn't know. I had no sense of it. I didn't know what it was going to be like to drive that far out. And the culture in Dodge City. You have the museums and you have these statues. And you have the El Capitan bull out there. And I was like, man, this is a wonderful town. And they brought me there for that festival to read poetry, but they also brought me in to write some poems to this collection of work from this photographer in the town. And she was capturing descendants of individuals who built the railroad from the village, is what they're called, in the East Side neighborhood in that area. And it was surprising me to find out that there's been people, descendants of Mexico who've been there for 4 or 5 generations. That was incredible to me to find out that they built their church and that their religious artifacts were brought in hand by nuns, to that town. Like, where's that Netflix movie? That's what I'm waiting for. Like, you can tell that story. There's so much history in Kansas, and as a travel through Kansas, I've had the opportunity to learn more. I I visit the libraries in those towns I'm at. If the museums are open, I go to them. I always eat at a local place. I find someone that's in the town and knows the town. Like, okay, you're my tour guide now. Let's go do this. Let's have our own Anthony Bourdain experience here.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and it's yeah, it's interesting to have your laureateship span these two different modes of connecting, like Barbara talked about. That both have. There's definitely some advantages to this way, as well. I'm kind of I've and others can jump in too. I don't want to monopolize anything, but I think that the state poet laureate model, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's spread to most, if not all, of the other U.S. states. So I'm wondering if you've had like kind of national opportunities tied in with that to get to know other people that are state poet laureates. I did see that the New York Times had a thing where they were posting poems from state poet laureates and about the pandemic, and one of yours was up there. For one thing, what's that part of it been like?
It's the opportunity that's been granted to me to increase my visibility and platform that is the poet laureateship in Kansas or in any state continues to grow. I've had the opportunity to work with folks in other states. Matt Mason in Nebraska, I've worked with him. I'm also familiar with Bobby Lefebvre in Colorado, who's an incredibly talented poet. And these are individuals who I've looked to and watched the work they're doing that's very important in their communities. And, we all have different loads to bear, in our community, in our literary communities. And just watching the way they've handled that has been great. Having a poem published in the New York Times, that's off the list, right? What's the Paris Review and the New Yorker, and I'll get around to it, I guess. I don't know at this point. If they accept my work, but I don't submit a lot, so that's they made a call for submissions for that. Not every poet laureate was published in it. They did choose, so like they hit me up, and I remember I was like, oh, I gotta get this done. I was like, this is right now, and I was freaking out because it was like a week time. They're like, you submit a poem, and I was like, about what? And they're like, oh, something you're thankful about, and I was informed by the pandemic as well at the time. The Thanksgiving Day Savings is, I think, what the poem is titled, and I'm very proud of that one. That I had an opportunity to say how I felt about that. And oh yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you for putting that up there.
I just thought put that in there.
It's one that I really I was worried a little bit because I was like, does this poem seem passive aggressive? It's just how I felt about Thanksgiving. My Thanksgiving was me, my partner, and my son. I wanted to see my mother, wanted to spend Thanksgiving with her and hug her. But the things were still pretty bad. They weren't well at all. But we made the right choice. We stayed home and everyone's still here.
Yeah, and it's so and it's so cool to have a poem to capture what so many people, or something like what so many people were experiencing with Thanksgiving being so different last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Typically Thanksgiving is a time of communion, right? It's a time to get together, to gather, to give grace, and it just felt like we were running out of grace by that point. That's how I felt about it. Passion fatigue was setting in. People were feeling incredibly isolated, and we didn't have a lot to feel thankful about other than still being here. And that's a bare level existence. And I think those experiences can either bring a community together, bring a family together, or pull people apart. And I think it brought us together. At the end of the day, I really do believe it brought us together. In poetry, especially because poetry gives you that opportunity to capture a moment. Through all the senses. It is the act of memory. You're actively recording memory when you're writing poetry. And that's what I did with that particular poem. Captured a moment of a sense of feeling I was experiencing that I knew other people could relate to. Because there's this universality. Oh, that's a horrible word for me to say. To poetry, because everyone feels emotion, regardless of the time and context. Everyone at some point has felt sad, afraid, anxious, fear, hopeful, and distressed. So to be able to capture that feeling, regardless of how the words were arranged, someone would capture that and connect with it at some point. I would say poetry allows you to say hard truths in soft ways, and I think that's what I did with that.
I liked especially the one where you shared about farmers, and that your ancestry were farmers. And my ancestry is my grandparents came from Russia. And so they settled in Kansas. And my dad rented land, and I've written poems about him because the difficulties, especially during the Great Depression, and and depended so much on weather. And my mother always praying either for rain or not to have it hail, or the weather problem. And so I think that's across the world, as farmers work closely to the land, and provide food, but they're not as much appreciated because professions are seen as more important.
I would agree with you on that. I believe there's this connotation that exists with the farmers and the way of living as like there's something wrong with simple. It's like, yeah, I've never understood. If you say something simply, it can be also referred to as eloquent. So you decide what lens to put on that lifestyle.
Mhm. Yeah.
So he worked hard then, John, like his entire life.
Oh yes, yeah, he did. He died at 45. That's when they started using DDT in the fields. He died of lung cancer, and so my mother had to leave the farm and then work in a hospital in the city, and cleaning rooms and doing work in the kitchen. So when I look back now, I just see how difficult and hard their lives were, but they had such a deep love of life and of family. Yes.
Yes, I do get that from my mother and my father. Still, that sense of that, from their upbringing. That's something I hold on to. That love of life. For me, it's more. Everything's a mystery to me. I always feel like I'm in this constant state of discovery. Like poetry is this lens I put on most things. I can look at it. From a panoramic view or from a personal view, something microscopic and small, or something large and grand like the universe. And poetry still can capture that. It can still fit that magnification at all times. And it's allowed me to enjoy life and to be in this constant state of awe about what I experience. And even when I feel, dips of despair, I know poetry will always pull me up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Beautiful, pregnant pause. I don't mind silence. How are we doing on time, Sam?
Yeah, well, we've spent enough time, I think.
There's never enough time, Sam. There's never enough time.
Well, we've spent enough, but not too much. So, I think it's the thing about poetry is that whenever you start reading it, talking about it, I don't know, I start thinking about a million different things. Do you guys feel that way? It's like there's so many thoughts and things that you've thought about a week ago or a month ago or a year ago that come back to you, that are kind of brought on by this the associative work that poetry does. It just brings it all back to you, and then it can make it kind of hard to to think of questions to ask during a Q&A, I guess. But I don't know. I feel like I've got that good feeling from poetry and being with poetry that there's yeah, cool good feelings and mind expanding and all that. And we didn't even do any LSD. So
I tell people poetry is a gateway drug to literature. So
that's what LSD stands for, is literature. So yeah, hopefully our director isn't watching this, but anyway. But well, cool. Well, I think this is a good time to leave it, and I know that we all really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to the Public Library. Thank you, United Kansas. Today was Poem in Your Pocket Day. So if you didn't have a poem, there's still time. There's still a couple hours to go find a poem to keep in your pocket. I like to say keep it in your deepest pocket, your heart. The poem I always carry is Jimmy Santiago Baca's I Am Offering You This Poem. If you've never read it, please do check it out. If you're interested in my work, go to walkmedina.com. Visit Humanities Campus page for more information on bringing other speakers to your library.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So much. Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. Bye.
Bye.